Hi, everybody. Wow, this is a really big crowd. Thankfully, we're on Zoom, so we don't have to worry about any kind of bad weather action. So, welcome. If you are here to find out about Raphael Pumpelly, you are in the right place. And I'm Susie Spickle from the Harris Center. Very excited about this. We're just going to give a few minutes as people show up. While we're waiting, feel free to pop in the chat where you are zooming in from and something that you really love about Mount Monadnock. So you can put that right in the chat today, and we'll wait for people to um, show up because this is very popular. There's over almost 300 people signed up for tonight's event. And oh, Deerfield, New Hampshire, love to climb Mount Monadnock in the winter. Way to go, Alan. That's very adventurous. I love it. I like to climb Mount Monadnock too, but not so much in the winter. Let's see some more things are happening.
Ooh.
Great. Do you see one? Who was that?
Yeah,
Michelle. Do you?
Maple
Yeah.
Springs, New York. Love
Whoa.
getting to the top and enjoying the view. Wonderful, Jill.
I know. And our very own Brett, she loves to see it in the distance from wherever she is in the region. Way to go, Brett. I love that too. Pumpelly Cave. Matt, are you going to talk about Pumpelly Cave?
I will mention Pumpelly Cave. Yes, it's
God, I didn't
an
even know there was a
intriguing
cave.
spot.
Oh, good. Everybody's loving the view. Oh, I like this.
Hmm.
Earn my patch for climbing all the trails. Way to go.
Oh,
Snow-capped
wow.
peaks. Michelle, you got any good ones want to share?
So many about the view.
Yeah, so many
Yeah.
about the view.
And the snow-capped peaks. Gorgeous.
Oh, wow. Lori Jameson climbing it
Oh,
every week.
yes, I just saw that one
Very
from
ambitious.
Lori.
Yeah. Oh, it's somebody likes to see the sun hitting the ice. I love that too. It's such an icon in our region, and for people all
Oh.
over the world. Really, so
And
exciting.
Francie says that there's a fall climb with Franklin Pierce students. That's great, a whole group going together.
I like this. Beth Caldwell, she loves the memories of three generations of her family climbing the beautiful mountain. Oh, and somebody, oh, who was this? Bonnie said the Pumpelly Trail almost did me in. I had the same experience a couple of
Oh,
times.
no.
Oh, goodness, so exciting. Well, I think we might be ready to get started. Feel free to keep putting in your thoughts in the chat. I'm just going to kind of get us going. The first thing is I want everybody to know that this event is being recorded. It will go up on our YouTube. If you don't want to appear in our recording, you can always close off your video. You might also notice that we have everybody muted except for the co-hosts. If you have questions during tonight's event, and we hope you will, we're going to ask that you put that right in the chat. But we're also going to ask that you kind of keep the chat focused on the topic. So we're hoping that everybody can do that, and that'll be great. And yeah, Brett, am I forgetting anything else about the rules? I have to ask my colleague Brett because I'm
Not
rusty.
rules, but just closed captioning. If folks
Oh
would like
yeah.
to enable it, you can turn it on yourself. You can turn it off yourself under the More button at the bottom of your screen. Look for Hide Subtitles or See Subtitles.
Thanks so much for remembering that, Brett. I am a little rusty. All right, I'm Susie Spickle, Community Programs. I'm one of the naturalists at the Harris Center, and I'm just going to welcome all of you tonight. And I want to thank all of you who are supporters of the Harris Center, who help us continue to protect land and cross salamanders, band owls, count hawks, and help us connect people of all ages to the natural world through programs just like this one. And without your financial support and community support of from people like you, we wouldn't be able to do any of it. I also want to give a really big shout out to our co-hosts tonight, which include the Historical Society of Cheshire County, and tonight that's represented by Michelle Walker, and Monadnock Center for History and Culture. And I'm not sure, I don't see Michelle, but if you're here, just send me a little chat and I'll make sure I introduce you. So I also wanted to let people know about two upcoming Harris Center events. And the first one, I can't really talk about that much because we happen to have the Salamander Crossing Brigade Queen right here. Brett Thielen, tell us what's going on with salamanders.
Yeah, hi. I see some familiar names out there. Some of our Salamander Brigade volunteers are here tonight, but we are getting ready for our spring salamander season. 1 week from tonight is this year's volunteer training for our Salamander Crossing Brigade project entering its 20th season. So we train volunteers to go out on rainy spring nights and help move frogs and salamanders across the road as they migrate from the woods to the wetlands where they breed. Matt actually is one of our longtime volunteers at the North Lincoln Street site in Keene. So if you're curious about the spring amphibian migration and what this is all about, we have a Zoom training. So please join us. It's 1 week from tonight at 7 p.m. and I'll put the link in the chat in just a few minutes. So hope to see you there.
That's great. And just one more upcoming Zoom event is on March 25th. You can join me for a lunch and learn where I'll be talking about one of my most favorite mammals, also a very misunderstood mammal. And I'm so excited because Mead Cadeau is here. He taught me everything I know about this animal. I'll be giving a talk on the true life and times of New Hampshire's fisher. So if you want to come find out the real truth about this fascinating weasel member, come and join us on March 25th from 12 to 1 for a Zoom lunch and learn. And now I'm going to turn it over to Michelle, who's going to tell us a little bit about what she's up to.
Thanks, Susie. Hi, everybody. I'm Michelle Walker. I'm the Director of Education for the Historical Society of Cheshire County. That's in Keene, New Hampshire. We're really excited to be part of this presentation tonight. We are very well connected with Matt, our presenter tonight. He is a member of our board of directors and also works very closely with me on the education committee. Always very grateful for his support. So very happy to be here supporting that. I want to tell you about a couple of programs that we have coming up as well. For the next 2 Wednesdays, we have 2 book talks that are coming up. On March 11th at 6:30, and all of these are at the Historical Society in Keene, by the way. On March 11th at 6:30, we're going to have a book talk from the very first director of education for the Historical Society. His name's Tom Haynes. And he worked for years researching a book about Frank Barber, who is a Keene resident who went in the late 1800s to the Klondike, had many incredible adventures there. The book's name is Dead Horse Soup. Very interesting title. Come to the talk to hear more about why that is the title of the book. The next week after that, March 18th, we have another book talk by Julie Dobrow, who is a professor at Tufts University in Massachusetts. And her book is called Love and Loss After Wounded Knee. The book is about the Eastman family. So Charles Eastman, who actually was a member of the, let me get the name right here, a member of the, where is this? I'm sorry, excuse me, the Santee Dakota tribe. There are many branches of that tribe. He was a student at Dartmouth College and fell in love with the area. His wife Elaine and he opened a camp in Munsonville on Granite Lake called Camp Oahe. So Julie did a lot of her research at the Historical Society. So we're excited to have her do her book talk there. And that's going to be on March 18th at 6 p.m. And just to throw this out there to you, if you are in the area, in April, we're going to have our brand new exhibit on the American Revolution opening on April 15th. It's called Beyond the Battlefield, Cheshire County, New Hampshire in the Revolutionary Period. And we're representing a diverse array of experiences of different people in the Revolution to explore how local people were affected by what was going on in the big picture. So definitely come check it out. We've got an opening reception on April 15th from 4 to 6 if you're in the area.
Appropriate that
Thank
it's
you
on
for the
tax,
opportunity. Oh, I'm sorry, Matt.
appropriate that it's on tax day, right? The American
Oh,
Revolution.
that's right. I didn't even think of that.
Perfect,
Well, it could
perfect.
be a welcome distraction from that.
Well, thank you so much. This is very exciting. I know you guys out in in the audience are probably looking forward to hearing from Matt, and I'm about to introduce him. So I just want to remind people that as we're going along, put your questions in the chat, and we're saving 10 minutes at the end. Michelle will ask Matt your questions, so put those right in the chat. It is absolutely my pleasure tonight to introduce Matt Myer Boulton, who has been also really involved in Harris Center programs and been a teacher. And let me just tell you a little bit about him. He's an author, a teacher, a filmmaker, and he is a very gifted speaker on a wide range of topics. Things like Mary Oliver, the power of walking, which I just love that one, Matt, and tonight's topic on Raphael Pumpelly. He's a graduate of Northwestern University, Harvard Divinity School, and the University of Chicago's Divinity School. And he has served on the faculty of Harvard Divinity School and as president of Christian Theological Seminary. His books include Life in God, John Calvin, Practical Formation and the Future of Protestant Theology, God Against Religion, Rethinking Christian Theology Through Worship, and rumor has it that what we're hearing tonight is a little bit of a glimpse on a new book that Matt is working on that's going to be featuring the Monadnock region. So let's give Matt a big round of Zoom applause and let's find out what he has to say about Raphael Pumpelly. Thanks, Matt.
Great, thank you. I'm going to share my screen. And get rolling here. All right. Welcome, everybody. And this is going to be a lot of fun. This is Raphael Pumpelly is really one of the most incredible people and one of the most remarkable lives, really, I think, to be lived in the Monadnock region. So we're going to dive into him and compare him to Indiana Jones, right? That makes all the sense in the world. Well, you'll see that it is a playful, but I think pretty compelling case that we can make as we move into this. And we will compare these two characters. Just to clarify, Raphael Pumpelly is on the left and Indiana Jones is on the right. How on earth could we possibly think that we could even begin to compare these two? Well, let's start here. They're both New England professors. Those of you who remember your Indiana Jones, remember that Dr. Jones teaches at a fictional college in Connecticut, and Raphael Pumpelly taught at Harvard. He was actually the first professor of mining at Harvard University. Second, they're both worldwide adventurers, as we'll get into. They were pursuers of ancient treasures. And they both have, in different ways, of course, but a mixed legacy of light and shadow. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that and what it means to remember people and kind of remember what's great about them and also what we want to learn from and maybe repair in their legacy. So people are complicated. I'm complicated. You're complicated. And so is Raphael Pumpelly. So is Indiana Jones. So we'll take that as our last move during our romp. This is a swashbuckling figure. Both these guys are swashbuckling. So make sure your swash is buckled. Here we go. We're going to start with science because we're honoring Pumpelly. He is a scientist, first of all, and geology is swashbuckling in its own way. It is really a remarkable branch of science. A lot of people think it's boring, but it isn't. People think it's a niche for rock nerds, right? It's the, lifeless, hard, dull, these rocks or these metals. They're still, they don't move, they're sidelined, we're glad they're there when we need them, but they're not really that important. They're not central to our lives. But on the contrary, rocks are actually the stuff of life. They are flowing and elastic in really surprising ways. They're dynamic, always changing. They're always on the move, and they're really central to our lives and even central to the existence of complex life on Earth. So we're going to touch on all of that in the next few minutes, and then we'll get into Raphael. This is the stuff he loved. So we'll start with what he loved, and then we'll get to his swashbuckling life. But, rocks are swashbuckling in their own way. Pick up a handful of soil, and you are holding one of the most remarkable, miraculous things in the universe. You'll see it said that there's more microbes in 1 teaspoon of soil than there are people on Earth. That's not quite right. But if you get a handful, you'll have about that many microbes or even more. So there's a lot of life in that handful. But it's only 5% organic matter. It's mostly, or almost mostly, about half of it is mineral. So things like feldspar and mica and other things, it's kind of rock dust. It's also water and air, but a lot of it is mineral. And those plants that are drawing those minerals up, those plants are making life out of those minerals, and we eat the plants, or we eat the animals who eat the plants. So vitamins and minerals, right? That's what we say. Minerals are literally the stuff of life. So we are kind of like the thing. We are built in stone, literally in stone. If I took the stone out of your body, you would collapse into a bag of gel. Your skeleton, there's collagen in there too, but it's mostly your skeleton, a lattice of mineral crystals. That's what your skeleton is. That's what your teeth are. You've got iron in your blood. You've got phosphorus in your DNA and in your nerves. You are made of minerals in large part. So it's often said, and it's a good thing to remember, you aren't on the earth. You are the earth rearranged. Your body is this amazing technology that draws up not only minerals, but minerals and rearranges them into you. You are geological. So for sure, geology is the stuff of life. Now let's look at the planet Earth. We think of this as one of the rocky planets. We call it a rocky planet. But if we go inside, the stuff we think of when we think of rocks, the hard stuff that doesn't move much or that, hurts when you bump your toe into it, that's just the crust. The proportions here are really remarkable. Only 1% of the planet is its crust. So that to give you a sense of that, if you hold an apple in your hand, the proportional crust would be just the skin of the apple. So most of the apple is not this hard rock that we think of. It's much more elastic. Sometimes it's molten and liquid. The land masses are all granitic. They're made of granite. So we call ourselves the granite state, but all the land masses are made of granitic rock, primarily granitic rock. You can think of, apple on the one hand, you can think of avocado on the other as a nice metaphor. The crust is the skin. The core of the earth is the pit, or it's a seed actually inside of an avocado. And then the mantle is that green flesh. But here we go. Let's take a look. We've got the inner core. That's iron and nickel. It's solid. It is spinning. It is spinning at a different rate than the Earth is spinning. The outer core is liquid. And it is, convection currents like the ones in your teapot. The hot material goes up and then it goes away from the heat source and cools off and comes back down because it's cold and then it heats up again. And this creates a convection current. That's happening in that liquid core. And because of the spin of the Earth, that liquid core creates currents that are in a helix shape. And that creates electricity. So this stuff is not only moving, it's not only in helic currents, it's electric. It's creating an electric charge inside the liquid core of the Earth. And that creates, as many of you know, a magnetic field. And if it wasn't, because when you have an electric current, you have a magnetic field. If it wasn't for this magnetic field, the solar wind would probably blow off our atmosphere. And that would not go well for you or for me. So we owe the protection from the solar wind to the magnetic field. We owe the magnetic field to that electric current in the liquid core underneath our feet. And then you've got the crust. And about from, high school, you've learned about tectonic plates, or I'm sure there are many geologists or amateur geologists listening in to this conversation. Tectonic plates, big pieces of the crust, they move around, they crash into each other and cause all kinds of things to happen. It's very dynamic, lots of change. When those plates crash, they will create mountain ranges, among other effects. That's what happened around here, right? So we are living within the roots of an ancient mountain range. It wasn't quite as big as the Himalayas, but it was probably as big as the Andes. And we call that, this is, just to give you a kind of a sense, this is not an actual photo of the Acadian Mountains, but the Acadian Mountains were here, and then they all eroded away except for some stubborn remnants. And we call one of those stubborn remnants Monadnock. So there's what happens when these big plates crash is you get the creation of mountain ranges, then erosion erodes them away. So very dynamic crust. The other thing that's happening on the crust is the rock cycle. We won't talk much about this, but we can start at the top there. The rain comes down. Little bits and pieces of rock dust causes sedimentation at the bottom of bodies of water. You get layer after layer after layer, a lot of pressure on those sedimentary layers, and they create sedimentary rocks. So, for example, sand, you get enough layers of sand, you get sandstone. That's a sedimentary rock. And then when you get layer on layer on top of that, you get more and more pressure, more and more heat. So pressure equals heat. It's basically a pressure cooker underneath our feet. And sandstone under those conditions will become quartzite. So that's a metamorphic rock. You can see that at the bottom of the cycle there. When rocks change from sandstone into quartzite, or from shale or mudstone into schist. And Monadnock is made of schist and quartzite primarily. It's not a big lump of granite. People think it's granite. It's not. It's schist and quartzite, but that's a metamorphic rock in that pressure cooker, transformed at the molecular level because of all that heat. Then there's also igneous rock. You see igneous rock over there on the left. That's when magma, which is molten rock, cools over a long period of time. That's what granite is. Cools over a long period of time in another little lattice of crystals, kind of like your skeleton. That's what granite is. And granite is all over the place, as I said, when you look at the land masses around the Earth. So this is the rock cycle, very dynamic. All these changes happening over long time scales. We think everything is still, but it's actually extremely dynamic and always changing. It's almost like if you took a time-lapse film, right? You'd see mountains coming up, mountains going down. When you climb Monadnock, you're climbing a remnant of this tremendous mountain range. So that's in a way what you're climbing up into is an absence of a mountain range that has eroded away, except for the tough, resilient lump under your feet, which we call Monadnock. Now, when that magma goes to the surface, we call it lava. And it also, when you get, there's a little close-up of the rock cycle. When you see that lava there on the left, it's not just lava that's coming out, it's also gases like carbon dioxide and other gases. So this is also a kind of picture for us to think about the carbon cycle. So not just the rock cycle, but the carbon cycle. Carbon goes up into the atmosphere. Then that rain will come down. Some of it will bring some of that carbon with it in the form of carbonic acid. That will erode some of the carbon that's in the rock down into sediments. And then as the layers form, and then as those layers go lower and lower into the earth, that's sequestering carbon. And then some of that carbon will come back out through volcanic activity. So they call that the carbon cycle. All this is driven by that tectonic plate activity. Some of it would happen without it, but it gets supercharged by the tectonic plates. And here's my last kind of amazing thing for you to think about. This is recent research over the past 5 or 10 years, that it's now thought that without plate tectonics, we may not have complex life on Earth. Why would that be? Why would plate tectonics create complex life on Earth? 3 reasons. First, the geological engine that I was talking about, it's like a remodeling. Plate tectonics is constantly remodeling the surface of the Earth, creating new shorelines, new continental shelves, shallow seas. A shallow sea is one of the most fertile, life-rich ecosystems on Earth. And plate tectonics is constantly creating new shallow seas, so new opportunities for life to evolve, new mountain ranges. When you climb Monadnock, you go up into different life zones and you see different species at different levels of the mountain. So biodiversity is helped by this creation and then erosion and then creation again of mountain ranges. All this activity, though, is also recycling nutrients. So if you have valuable, like calcium or phosphorus or iron, valuable minerals that are locked down in a couple layers down below your feet in stone, how are you going to get to it? How is life going to get to it? Plate tectonics creates a mountain range, throws those rocks up into the air in a mountain, and then allows the elements to get to it. And the higher you push up those rocks, the more elements you get, right? It's much harder. The winter's much harder on Mount Washington or on Mount Monadnock than it is down in Keene or wherever. So you get a lot of grinding up those little pieces of iron and phosphorus and sending them down into the valleys, down into the streams and the rivers and the oceans, and life picks them up. And then we get a new mountain range and then another. It's recycling those nutrients, and that helps life. And then finally, all this acts as a climate thermostat, which is kind of amazing. The warmer it gets, the more it rains. And that means the more carbon is washed down into those layers that are sequestered under our feet. The colder it gets, the less it rains. And so then the volcanic activity pushes more, or is able to push on balance more carbon dioxide up into the atmosphere, and that warms the atmosphere. So that keeps our climate relatively stable, so we don't turn into an ice ball or a greenhouse like Venus. And by the way, neither Venus nor Mars has plate tectonics, and we do. So there are astrobiologists, the people who think about extraterrestrial life, who think that we have to look for planets that have plate tectonics if we want to find complex life. Maybe there'll be microbial life other places, but complex life, they say we need plate tectonics. So that's kind of incredible. So coming back to this, geology is the stuff of life. It's flowing all around us and elastic. If we just expand our minds to look at larger timescales, it's constant change, constant dynamism, constantly on the move, and it's central to the history of life. All right. It's incredible. It's a swashbuckling, amazing discipline or area of science. And this guy loved it, and he devoted his life to it. He said, actually, in one of his memoirs, he writes a couple of memoirs, he says, I entered geology through the gates of romance, he says. Not the Valentine's Day romance. He means the romance of beautiful landscapes and the mystery of how they came to be. So check out that beard, right? I mean, that's worth it right there, just for the beard. We're going to rewind the beard, pull the beard in. We're going to go back in time. Okay, there it is. You can see it just starting there. So he's born in 1837, dies in 1923. It gives you a sense of when. He's born in Owego, New York. His family is fairly well-to-do and has lots of connections to lots of other interesting people in New England history. Gives you a sense. This is a postcard from 1909. This is the Susquehanna. The Susquehanna is the river that goes through Owego, New York. Susquehanna was a major thoroughfare for all kinds of goods, especially, well, you can guess, I'm sure, timber. So rafts full of timber or rafts made of timber. The Susquehanna goes down to the Chesapeake Bay. So this is a thoroughfare of commercial goods. Raphael's father, William, many of you know from living in New Hampshire that if you want to get rich, right, the thing to do is to have a general store, right? Because everybody gets rich if you have a general store. Well, that's actually was true in this period. William owned multiple general stores because everybody's going down that thoroughfare, not just the lumber folks, but the boat industry, right? Who's going to help them get downriver, other goods, other commercial goods and cargo that are going down to those big markets, those big urban markets. So the general store, they were where you get your food, your gear, your everything you need. And William Pumpelly, Raphael's father, became a wealthy man as a result, and they became a wealthy family. So wealthy that Raphael was educated at the finest private schools as he was growing up. And he was being groomed for Yale, right? They wanted him to go to Yale. At least father did. William wanted him to go to Yale. But as you can tell from the way I'm phrasing it, that's not quite how it went. Because, well, rewinding a bit to when he was 8 years old, his mother read to him Hugh Miller's The Old Red Sandstone. Hugh Miller was a Scottish geologist. The subtitle of the book is New Walks Through an Old Field. So it's a lovely title. So he's walking through the landscape of Scotland and writing in a way that ordinary readers could understand, even 8-year-olds could understand the amazing things if you know how to look at the rocks under your feet. And this just caught young Raphael's imagination. He began to scour the cliffs for fossils around his own backyard. So his mother's name is Mary Hollenbeck Wells. She is a poet, a published poet, a person of literary and artistic sensibility. She loved to travel. She was very cosmopolitan. And she would travel with her youngest son, that is Raphael, to Europe for months at a time. And while Raphael was there, he learned about the study of mining in Germany at the Royal Mining Academy in Freiburg. So he decides, instead of going to Yale, sorry, Dad, I'm going to go, here with Mom in Europe, I'm going to go to the Royal Mining Academy. He learns about mining from that academy. He also goes and visits mines across Europe. And at 23, he decides to go into the mining industry, having received his degree. And where he decides to go is Arizona. So Arizona at this time, this is 1860. So it's really not really the Arizona we think of yet. It is just recently was Mexico. It's newly part of the United States, but the United States really isn't there running it. There is a little bit of a presence of the military of the United States. The military of Mexico's withdrawn. There's some military from the United States, but then they get called to something else that's starting in 1860, right? The Civil War. So all of a sudden, there's no military, no law enforcement in the sense of the kind of thing that Raphael Pumpelly would recognize. And what there is the people who've been there for all along, or at least since time immemorial, and that is the Apache. The Apache were not too pleased either with the Mexicans or with the Americans. But this is the environment. He says, I'm going to go into that environment and do some geology and check out the mining industry in Arizona. It was silver mining. So we'll say a little bit more about that. But then he goes on to Japan and China from there. After a very eventful time in Arizona, he decides to get on a ship and go to Japan. He's working for the Japanese government to do surveying, geological surveying with an eye to mining. Then he does the same for China. He comes back, he writes his first memoir. So you can go check this out. It's available online, actually. You can read it online or find a copy somewhere. So Across America and Asia, Notes of a 5 years journey around the world. And I just want to call your attention to the bottom there. Raphael Pumpelly, professor at Harvard University. So that's what he does after he comes back from China. And sometime mining engineer in the service of the Chinese and Japanese governments. So here's the route. So you see, you start there in New England, and just imagine the route. He goes west from there, goes to Arizona, on to Japan, over to China. Then he crosses through Tibet and goes into Europe, and then makes his way back home over 5 years. I mean, imagine this. He's in his 20s. He's doing this. So here's a nice little quote to give you a sense of what he's experiencing in Arizona. The social disorganization in Arizona presented a phase of border life of the worst type indeed, but most valuable as showing the effect of the absence of the usual restraints upon society. So this is a nice piece of understatement. But let me read this to you. This is where things really get swashing and buckling. All right, here we go. This is chapter 2, okay? The Santa Rita Valley. So he's talking about his experience in Arizona with silver mines. So let's just take a romp here. Influence of climate and vegetation upon the scenery of Arizona. Journey to Fort Buchanan. Remarkable escape of a woman from Indian captivity. Fort Buchanan. A man killed by Apaches in sight of the fort. Subsequent murders of the same place. Previous mining industry at the Santa Rita. Difficulties opposed to mining. Our horses and mules stolen by Apaches. Repeated attacks. Rumored withdrawal of the troops. How Indian wars are begun. Violation of a flag of truce by U.S. troops. General consternation among the settlers. We determined to abandon the mines. Collecting debts. Journey to the Heselton mines. A load of ore sent to the Santa Rita. Exciting journey back to the mines. A suspicion of treachery. The Grosvenor and myself are set out in pursuit of delinquents. Return, an awful night. Assassination of Grosvenor. Arrival of troops, burials, discouraging prospects, necessity of an increased force at the mines, journey to the fort, a self-recorded murder, a scene of destruction and a race for life, terrible weapons, disappointment at the fort, return to the Santa Rita, smelting and fighting, abandonment of the Santa Rita. That is chapter 2. There are 11 chapters, as I recall, in this book. This is the life the guy's leading. It really sounds like Spielberg is writing the script or co-writing it. It's a remarkable and dazzling set of adventures. So here he is. He goes to Japan and China. He works for the government, as I said. Let's grow the beard a little bit because we're in the midlife now. Now he's going to be a professor, so he needs to really grow the facial hair out so he can look really dignified and important and smart. 10 years as a professor. He didn't really like being a professor, as you can tell from that summary of chapter 2. He'd much rather be out in the field having adventures, but he did like his students. He's there for, roughly 10 years. Here's the amazing thing here. He stays in a boarding house in Cambridge, which is owned by Harriet Jacobs. Harriet Jacobs, then the famous author of Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl, formerly enslaved, moves from the South up to Cambridge, opens a boarding house, and Raphael Pumpelly lives there. So when you get your opportunity to do time travel, I recommend going back to 1870 in Cambridge and just, see if you can sit in for dinner with Raphael and Harriet. I mean, it's incredible. You can't make this stuff up. He then works for me. He says, this is good. He says, I needed to keep my business options open because the salary at Harvard was so low. So he wasn't paid enough at Harvard. So he's working with the state of Michigan. They're interested in copper mining. And so he's going out doing the surveys to find out where the copper is and how to get to it, right? How to get to it and as with an eye toward commercial enterprise. What do you think this is? This is a mineral that he discovers in Michigan, in the UP, Upper Peninsula of Michigan. It is known today as Pumpellyite. So this mineral and other minerals in the family are all known as Pumpellyite minerals in honor of his discovery in Michigan. So it just gives you a sense of his stature as a geologist in American history. He does the same thing in Missouri, where he's working for Missouri, but there the focus was on iron ore and coal. Again, the question is, how do we get this stuff commercially viable? Where is it? How do we get to it? What makes most sense about where we should dig and set up our mining operations? He also becomes the director of the U.S. Geological Survey in the New England branch. And the division, the language is economic geology. Okay, so he's using science for the sake of commercial enterprise, for the sake of economic prosperity. And he's becoming a very wealthy man in the process. All right. Now, I think we're going to shift here. He leaves Harvard. He's done with his work for Michigan and Missouri. He settles in Newport, Rhode Island, and that's where he spends kind of the winter time. But in the summertime, he wants to get out of the city. He wants to get somewhere, in the fresh air and somewhere where he has a nice view. We all see this coming, right? Where is he going to choose? So in 1883, he visits Dublin. He's visiting his wife's sister, and he says, this is it. He says, he writes about it. He says, I was walking on an old road and we saw the Green Mountains in the distance and I knew this was the place. So he hires this very august or distinguished architect. And he says, here's the plans, or, you design the house, make it happen. And then they build the house. He's not there. They build the house and he arrives with his family for the summer and there's the house. So imagine that. Imagine not seeing the house until you're there. And then there's your new house and it's been made and you walk in and you have dinner. So he starts his time in Dublin. He would split the year. He'd spend some of the time in Rhode Island and then some of the time, the summer months and maybe into the fall because it's so beautiful in the fall in Dublin. So this is his wife, Eliza Frances Shepard. This is a portrait of Eliza Frances Shepard by John Singer Sargent, the famous painter. So just the fact that there is a painted portrait of her at all, but never mind a painted portrait of John Singer Sargent, you start to get a sense of just how many resources now are available in the family, that he's doing very well for himself. She is the connection through her cousin, Lucy Elizabeth Abbott, to Dublin, because the Abbott family had been there, cousins of Eliza, and then her sisters, Ellen and Rebecca. That's the connection to Dublin originally. They go visit, they fall in love, they build the house. This is the house. So it's since burned down in 1919. They built another house that burned down in 1979. But this is Auf der Höhe, or on the heights. So Auf der Höhe is German for on the heights. And you might think it's because they were up on the ridge and they were on the heights and they had the nice view, and I'm sure that was part of it. But Auf der Höhe is also the name of a German novel. It's an interesting novel. It's a book about a king who thinks that he's above the law and above custom and above ordinary people. But over the course of the novel, he learns that no, to be a fully human being, you need to be in connection with others and even people who don't have money, and you need to be in connection with culture, in connection with custom, and in connection with the law. So that's the journey of the book. My guess is this is probably a favorite of Raphael's when he was studying in Germany, right? Because that's where he's spending his formative years studying. But that, in any case, that's what he names the house, or they named the house this, on the heights. And we can only imagine it because it, of course, went down to fire in 1919. Here's a 1858 drawing of Monadnock. Here we go, Monadnock Mountain and Lake. But of course, this is Dublin Pond, or Dublin Lake is sometimes called. So you see that little road up there. This is roughly where up on the left there is roughly where the Pumpelly Trail is, and that may be the road, where he was walking, right? When he said, "Oh yeah, this is the place. I see the Green Mountains." One reason I wanted to show this is just to give a sense that back then, in the mid 19th century, Monadnock looked a lot different than it does now. Right now, it's largely forested. Then it would have been a patchwork: some forest, some lots of pasture land, agricultural land, logging roads, things like that, agricultural roads. So this is the kind of thing that it was probably what would have probably looked like roughly when he built Auf der Höhe, on the heights. Right up there is where you see that road, and that's where the Pumpelly Trail is, because that's what happens in around 1884. Raphael Pumpelly, blazes that summit-bound trail that bears his name, the Pumpelly Trail we were talking about earlier. The longest way up the mountain. It's a long way through forest. Once you get up on that ridge, it really is pretty spectacular, because ridge trails are pretty fantastic, right? I mean, the summits are great, but when you're on a ridge trail, it's like you're on this kind of extended summit. So I recommend the Pumpelly Trail if you'd like to go. And then on the east side of the mountain, at a spot that's not marked, and it's secret because if we all knew about it, we would all go to it, is the Pumpelly Cave that some of you may have heard about. So the Pumpelly Cave is a little hut with a door that was built into a natural cavity in the stone. And it was built by Raphael Pumpelly's son, Raphael Pumpelly II, and also Abbot Thayer's son. So Abbot Thayer, the most famous painter, really probably in Monadnock, the Monadnock region's history, also had a house on Monadnock and spent a lot of time there painting Monadnock, among other things. Very well-known painter, Abbot Thayer. His son was friends with Raphael Pumpelly's son. They built what's called the Pumpelly Cave. So some of you know where it is, and others of you don't. And it's if you don't know, it's hard to find out. You got to find someone who knows, because they don't want it to be overrun and vandalized and that kind of thing. But back in the day, there would be bunks in there. There's the door, as I said. They had a guest book, and it's a pretty cool place. So the beard's getting longer, but the adventures aren't stopping. So here we got the last stage of the beard, the last stage of his life. Carnegie funds an archaeological dig that speaking of his son, he and his son go to Turkmenistan to study the Anau mounds. What this was a archaeological project to try to find out more about the civilizations in this area, this part of the world, because Pumpelly thought that this might be the historical roots of the civilizations that move west into Europe. So he thought this could be the kind of ancestors of European civilizations. And he and Carnegie wanted to find out more about that, to test that hypothesis out. So that's why he went. That's why he was funded to go. But at this point, he's like 66, and he's going to Turkmenistan to do an archaeological dig. here's a sense of, that landscape. Um, his work in Turkmenistan in this area of the world is still cited today. It was groundbreaking at the time, and it's still highly respected today as archaeological work. So it's really a kind of a remarkable third chapter, you could say, or fourth chapter, or fifth chapter of his life. Speaking of chapters, he publishes another memoir called My Reminiscences in 1918, and then he dies a few years later. Just one final note before we get to the mixed legacy idea, which is an interesting topic. This is a final irony. He's buried in Rhode Island. Remember, he was splitting his time between Rhode Island and New Hampshire. He's buried there, at this point, he's very famous. He's very wealthy. The grave is very elaborate. It has a bronze effigy or sculpture of him and his academic regalia, also of Eliza uh, in hers, and in her full dress. And so you've got these two bronze sculptures. The grave since that time has fallen into some neglect and vandalism. And some folks stole those sculptures, presumably for the bronze. So to cash in on the value of the bronze in the sculptures, to, in a way, a kind of mining, you could say, taking those bronze sculptures away from the grave. So it's a sort of sad but ironic ending there to at least the grave site. All right, so here we go. Wrapping up, but kind of moving to this final chapter of the talk, and then we'll open it up for questions. So two New England professors, right? There he is, Dr. Jones and Dr. Pumpelly. Two worldwide adventurers, two pursuers of ancient treasures. And then also this last category here, this mixed legacy. Both of them have mixed legacies, we could say, in different ways. Obviously, one's fictional, one's real, but we're talking about light and shadow. And I think it's important and interesting to think about history and ourselves in this complicated way, because we're all complicated. So let's take a look at that for a second. Okay, on the one hand, let's talk about Pumpelly. He advanced knowledge and prosperity, right? I mean, so did Dr. Jones, but certainly Dr. Pumpelly did. On the other hand, he also advanced extractive and colonial projects. So we think of Indiana Jones as swashbuckling and finding cool statues, but of course what he's doing is looting. And there is a lot of history of looting in the history of the West and the history of museums. Here's a recent shot of the Met in New York City, the Metropolitan Museum, returning Cambodian sculptures, works of art, to Cambodia. These were looted and trafficked during the war in Cambodia. So this kind of thing's happening more and more in museums all over the place. And that's part of the history of archaeology. It's also, in a different way, part of the history of extractive industries. You're taking, you're exploiting, and it does lead to sometimes results that aren't great. On the one hand, certainly Raphael Pumpelly admired and valued the natural world. On the other hand, he contributed to ecological devastation in different ways. Mining itself causes lots of ecological damage, and so does burning coal, and so does metallurgy in many ways. But of course, it also leads to prosperity. So there's a kind of ambivalence there. Pumpelly showed a remarkable respect and advocacy for Native Americans when he would write about the Apache and others, partly because he's a scientist, right? He's going to Turkmenistan to study ancient civilizations. He had a real respect for different kinds of cultures, including Native American cultures. That was remarkable for his time. On the other hand, he recommended military removal of Native American groups, forcing them to go to other parts of the continent. And he also advocated for what was then called cultural elevation, and this is a kind of euphemism. Many of you know about the Native American boarding school movement, where basically the idea was, okay, let's not kill all of these folks, but let's take their children, sometimes forcibly, and forcibly enroll them in schools where they are taught Western ways, Western manners, Western dress, English, Christianity. One of the earliest such schools that was focused on this civilization project, the United States government had a fund called the Civilization Fund that was using to fund this stuff, which is quite a use of the word civilization to use it for that kind of work. But one of the earliest schools was called Moore's Indian Charity School, and it was in Connecticut. The idea was Native American students and train them in Christianity and send them out as missionaries to go convert their fellow tribesmen and tribeswomen. That was the idea of the school. The head of the school said, you know what, we need to expand. We need to attract more folks, not just Native Americans, but others as well. But we need more space for that. Connecticut didn't have it, wouldn't support it as a state, so he went up north because he found that he could get some support up there. So he went up north to Hanover and he expanded his school into a college. That college became Dartmouth College. So the origins of Dartmouth are linked to this civilization project of trying to culturally transform Native American culture. So it's interesting. It's complicated. Finally, Pumpelly was a wise and humane purveyor of international relations. You know, this is an 1870 book. This is the uh, dedication of a book in 1870. You know, listen to this. He says, as so many of the following pages relate to experiences illustrating the wisdom of that diplomatic policy which, in bringing China into the circle of interdependent nations, promises good to the whole world, I dedicate them, the pages, to the chief author of that policy, to Anson Burlingame. In other words, let's welcome China into the circle of nations. Very enlightened and cosmopolitan for the time. So, you know, is he a hero or a villain, right? Do we go with the green or do we go with the gray? Of course, the answer, at least from my point of view that I submit to you for your consideration, is both. It's green and gray. Here we go. This is the picture of the human experience. This is granite, right? Flecks of green, flecks of gray, interlacing crystals. All of us are these things. All of us are mixtures of light and shadow. And so when we remember history, we shouldn't whitewash it, nor should we overshadow the good things. You know, we have to do understanding, we have to appreciate, and then we also have to critique. If we can do all three of those things, understand, appreciate, and critique, then I think we not only are in touch with humanity, Raphael Pumpelly's humanity, we become more human as we do that. We become more human when we do those three things together. And we can hope that our descendants will treat us with the same critique and the same generosity. So here's our man. We're going to grow the beard now for the last time. Raphael Pumpelly, the adventurer and the swashbuckler of the Monadnock region. This is Monadnock. This is geology. This is the hidden history under our feet. Now, I really am looking forward to the conversation. I'm sure there are people who are in this gathering who know things about Pumpelly, and I want you to put that stuff in the chat. There might be questions that you ask that I don't know the answer to, but some of you may know the answer to it. That's the beauty of this kind of local community history, where we can kind of pool our knowledge. But what a great subject to pool our knowledge about, this amazing life that was lived right here in our backyard. So thanks very much for your attention. Then I'll open it up for questions. I think I got the 10 minutes for questions, so let's do it.
Yeah, you're right on time. It's 6:20 exactly. We have a question from Bruce Brennan asking if you know the name of the architect that built the cottage in Dublin originally. I tried looking it up while you were finishing your presentation and I couldn't locate that.
I don't know it off the top of my head, but I know it's available because I've seen it in print several times. So I know it's there. Maybe someone can find it and pop it in the chat. That's the kind of thing I bet we can do even before we adjourn today. Yeah, he was
Excellent.
a very respected architect.
Mm. I found the name of the person who built his house in Newport, but I couldn't find the name of the architect for Dublin. We have another, more so a request from Carolyn Sweet. Can you share any details about the making of the Pumpelly Trail?
Yeah. I know that he blazed it, and that's a kind of remarkable thing. It's hard to blaze a trail. And his son is really working closely with him by this point. So my guess is he probably had his son, maybe even Abathayer's son, right? Because they go and build that cave. So it was probably a team. I mean, anybody who's done any trail building, it's serious work. Once you get up to that ridge, those of you who've hiked it, it's a little bit of a different project because you're going almost stone to stone at that point. But when you're going through the woods, that's a big deal. So yeah, I don't know much more than the fact that he was the one who kind of charted it and blazed it, but he probably had a lot of help.
We have an answer on the architect question from Susie, who did a
Great.
better Google search than I did. Charles E. McKim was the architect for the Dublin house.
Nice.
And we have another question from Annie Faulkner. Did Raphael Pumpelly make any particular geological discoveries in Mount Monadnock or around that area?
Not that I'm aware of. By that point, I mean, I'm sure he was looking with interest as he would do his hiking and that kind of thing, but I don't know of any discoveries that he made. And what I kind of infer from the reading is that he's enjoying a kind of different gear when he's here during the summertime. He's not working as hard, I think, and in terms of doing that kind of geological work. But yeah, I'm not aware of any discoveries that he made personally on Monadnock. I think he was here more recreationally, put it that way.
Yeah, definitely it seemed like he liked that sort of vibe in the Mount Monadnock region. Yeah. We have another question from Jacqueline Lyon. Do you happen to know what his son ended up doing in life, profession or anything like that?
I don't know. That's another good question. I bet we could find that out, though. I like that question. Yeah. All these folks have such interesting connections to other interesting people. The whole family tree is interesting. And I'll just throw out one. Um, Mary Hollenbeck Wells. It's a distant cousin, but Orson Welles is a in that family tree, a distant cousin of Mary Hollenbeck Wells. So Raphael's mother.
That's interesting. Oh, wow.
She's a
Oh,
poet, right? And he's obviously a great
mhm.
artist, but they were distant cousins,
That makes sense.
so to speak.
We have a little help on the how he blazed the Pumpelly Trail. Lisa Foote says that his brother John was involved in helping him build the trail.
Sounds right. Got to get your brother involved.
And do you know, this is from Pablo Fleischman, is Eliza's Gorge named after his wife?
That would make sense. I don't know. Do others may know that history? That would make a lot of sense to me, though. That's a great
Hmm.
point.
That would be quite a coincidence if it wasn't.
Right.
Okay. Um, do you know
Hmm.
if how many sons and daughters he had? This is from Francie Yeager. He had 5 children, but do you know how many sons and daughters he had?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I bet again we could probably turn that up before in the next 5 minutes, but I don't know the if it's 3 and 2 or something like that, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, what the split is. Lisa Foote says that Eliza Gorge is not named for his wife, it's named for Eliza Adams.
Oh, okay, that's good to know. There you go.
Yes.
How rumors get started.
Yeah. And we have another question from Dan Shows. Is it true that early settlers burned the mountain to remove wolves and coyotes and erosion to clear the top?
I love that question. So when you go to the Monadnock headquarters, there's obviously lots of ways up the mountain, but if you go to the actual headquarters, as you're starting up the trail on the right, just at the very outset of the trail on the right, there's a little cabin that serves as like a little museum. And you go in there. First of all, it's great to visit because it has a 3D model of the mountain and you can kind of see where you are and where you're going to climb. And it's great. I always think about that 3D model. It's very transformative to look at something like that at that scale. So go for that reason. But then in the back left-hand corner of the room, there is a a dressing of that famous story, which you will find that story everywhere in places that seem very authoritative, that farmers set fire to the top of Monadnock because that's where the wolves were denning, and it was to get rid of the wolves, and that's why there's no trees up there. So the former director of the Monadnock State Park has refuted it in a way, refuted that story in a way that's very compelling to me. I mean, to me, he makes a very, very strong case. Basically, there's good evidence that there was already a lot of open space, if not entirely open up there, well before the early 19th century, when supposedly that wolf fire was set. They say it was set in 1820, but there's already evidence that there's lots of open space up there. There's a great, I think it's called the Gale of 1815, which might have been part of the reason why some of that somewhat was cleared off. So you get wind, but you also have fires. It may be that one of the fires early on did go up over the top of the mountain, but it probably was uh, pasture land fires. So, in other words, clearing trees using fire, trying to just clear it for the sheep, essentially. But those fires sometimes got out of control. So the director of the Monadnock State Park says, look, that's this. If you're trying to get rid of wolves, the farmers wouldn't have used fire. They would have used a gun. That's how they went after wolves in those days. And the last wolf in this region was killed in 1820. So that doesn't fit with that narrative either. Final thing I'll say is one of the reasons why we all have this in our head, or a lot of us have this in our head, and you find it everywhere on the internet and find it other places, the story about the wolf fire, is because Henry David Thoreau wrote it down, and everybody respects Henry David Thoreau. A farmer
Oh, wow.
told him that story, and he then wrote it down and kind of popularized it. He took the word of the farmer kind of thing. So all of that is in the little museum that I described right at the entrance to Monadnock State Park in the headquarters part of the eastern side. So if you don't believe me, that's fine. Just go check that out and you'll see that myth debunked. It is a myth.
That's great. Oh, and Susie, by the way, said that there were no coyotes in this area until the mid 1940s,
There you go. New
which is
arrivals.
very interesting. Yeah, I wonder, Susie, do you know where they came from?
Oh yeah, you'll have to come to the wolf talk. We'll have to do a wolf and
Ah,
coyote talk.
Oh,
So yeah, it's a long story. But that was great, Matt. Let's just give Matt some thumbs up and really fabulous talk. And Michelle, great managing of the questions. And I think we're probably about out of time. So we want to thank all of you for coming. Thank Matt for putting this together. Michelle, do you have anything you want to add or say?
I just want to say thank you to Matt. This was really fascinating. It was great to learn more about him and his impact on the region. Yeah. And as a native Rhode Islander myself,
hey.
fun to learn that he's buried there. That I did not know.
Well, next time I hike the Pumpelly Trail, I'll have a lot of thinking to do. So thank you, and thanks to everybody tonight. And yeah, especially
Hey,
Matt. Great
thank
presentation.
you.